Good morning. Coastal Beach Water Quality Workgroup meeting.
Morning.
Good morning.
All right, I see that the unmute function is working. The meeting will mute you when you join, but you can unmute yourself. I see we have 22 people in the Zoom meeting. You can speak with me and pose questions. If you would like to pose questions and you don't have the meeting call-in information, and I'll periodically check my email so I can send you that if you wish to pose questions and speak during the meeting. Otherwise, this is being broadcast live on the Cal EPA website, so people can just watch and not pose questions. So just some housekeeping things. Let's do a roll call, and I will call out audiences that typically call in and attend these meetings so that I can see if you're here and you're listening. If you are here, just say here. One person is fine to do that, and then we can go into the discussion topics after we do roll call. My name is Karen. I am with the State Water Board up in Sacramento, and I host the Northern and Southern Coastal Beach Water Quality Workgroup meetings. Today is our webcast version due to the pandemic, and we've combined the Northern and Southern groups, so you're all in on the one meeting, which is a great opportunity for everyone to network and talk with people you might not normally interact with. So anyone else from the State Water Board who would like to say that they're here?
Pat Walsh, Senior Environmental Scientist supervising the Ocean Standards Unit.
Somima Clean Water Team.
I hear Eric, you're a little quiet there. Anyone else from the State Water Board? I'll get to the regional boards in a minute. Because it takes people a second to unmute themselves sometimes. Do we have anyone from SCWRP, the Southern California Coastal Water Research Project? All right, how about the counties? Do we have East Bay Parks?
Yes, Hal McLean, East Bay Parks.
And do we have anyone from Alameda and or Contra Costa counties?
Good morning, Cynthia Bartas, Alameda County Department of Environmental Health.
How about Humboldt County? Marin County?
Hi, this is Aarti here. I'm Project Manager, Environmental Health Services Division from the Marin County.
Hi, Artie. Monterey?
Hi, this is Donna Ferguson.
Hi, Donna. Mendocino? San Luis Obispo? I know I saw Liberty's name on there. I can't hear you if you're talking. How about Santa Barbara? Ventura? Los Angeles?
Good morning, this is Nick Brackman, and I believe Becky Valenti is also on.
Hi, Nick. Hi, Becky. San Diego? Santa Cruz?
Hi, Matthew Basset, Santa Cruz County Water Quality Lab.
Hi, Matthew. San Francisco?
Good morning, Diane O'Donoghue, SFPUC.
Hi, Diane.
Hey.
Orange.
Good morning.
Noma. Oh, sorry, who was that from Orange County?
Orange County, yeah, this is
Yeah.
Lauren Robinson with Orange County. I think Sham is also on the line as well.
Sure. Hi, Lauren. And if you do
John
join in and I've already passed your county, feel free to say, oh, I figured out the unmute function. How about Sonoma County? And San Mateo? All right, how about the regional water boards, the North Coast region, Region 1? San Francisco, Region 2. Central Coast, Region 3. Los Angeles, Region 4. Santa, Region 5. And San Diego, Region 9.
Jason Sear. I'm in the agriculture department down in San Diego.
Hello. I think I saw Shayna on from Los Angeles, Region 4, but again, feel free to announce yourself if I've gone over your county or your agency. How about other state agencies? Do we have anyone from Department of Public Health? Anyone from state parks? And any other state agencies?
Hey, Karen, it's Liberty from San Luis Obispo County. I don't know if you can hear me now.
Hi, Liberty. Yes, I can hear you. I knew I saw you on there.
Awesome.
How about local agencies? How about the City of LA and the Port of LA? City of San Diego. City of Orange.
County of Orange. This is John Payne.
Oh, County of Orange, sure. Let me go back and check you off of my list. City of San Clemente. City of Santa Cruz. City of Laguna Beach. City of Malibu. Any other local agencies that I might have missed?
John Griffith from Squirt.
Hi, John. All right, how about any federal agencies? US EPA? CDC? And any other federal agencies on? All right, how about universities? We have Stanford or Sacramento State? And entities. But nonprofits, we have Field Bay.
Hi, Karen. This is
I heard someone. Who was that?
any other federal agencies on?
I think if you're getting feedback, you probably have a mic from your computer and your mic from your headset on, perhaps. All right, I didn't hear anyone from Heal the Bay, and I couldn't quite hear who was trying to speak. Maybe you'll speak up a little bit later. How about Surfrider? The Bay Foundation? Any other non-profits?
Hi, this is...
Karen, Greg Smith from San Mateo County Environmental Health. I got in late, but I think you've already...
Oh, sure. Great. Thanks for speaking up.
This is Sherry Norris with the California Indian Environmental Alliance. I'm also part of the Tribal Marine Stewards Network and
Hi,
North
great.
Coast Resource Partnership.
All right. How about any consultants? MBC Aquatic Sciences? Larry Walker Associates?
Yeah, this is Hope from Larry Walker Associates. Hope Taylor, thanks.
Hi, Hope Taylor. Great, thanks. How about Weston Solutions? Geosyntech? McGowan Consulting? And Wood Environmental? All right, anyone else on the line I didn't call out?
This is David Turbo. I'm an independent scientist.
David?
This is David McCrae with Beverage and Diamond.
Great, thank you. Anyone else?
This is Javier Silva. I am a resident in Fort Bragg, but I'm also the transportation director for Manchester, Band of Pomo in Point Arena, and I also work with SIA on the Tribal Marine Steward program.
Great.
Hi, Karen. This is Audrey Levine from Santa Cruz County.
Hi, Audrey. All right, Santa Cruz, there we go. All right, now I got a chat from at least one person saying that they're having issues hearing the Zoom meeting. I will try to get to you as I'm going through the beginning of discussion. Now I'll talk about COVID-19, of course, and beach going and water quality. The reason we are bringing this up also is because the CDC does have some information available and a presentation which unfortunately did not pan out for today. I will try to get them to present a meeting. As for now, I will share some of their website links, so you can feel free to visit those websites if you like. And before we get to the COVID discussions, I did have one email from Hal at East Bay Park who posed a question about swimmer's itch. So Hal, I don't know if you want to start off the discussion with some of your questions, and we can have a short discussion about that before we move on to other things.
Sure. You know, we've been having swimmer's itch cases at Crown Beach in Alameda, and we had to talk to our staff about not switching our signs to yellow because of because they kept on wanting to change the signs to yellow, and we had to explain that that was due to, you know, that the water quality is different than the swimmer's itch situation. But I was kind of hoping that there would be some way of incorporating that, or I don't know if there's a way of incorporating something about red tides or something like that within the water quality signage, so that you can actually convey information and on one sign instead of having people have to look at two different signs when they come to the beach. But anyways, has anybody else had any swimmer's itch cases this year or in the past?
And don't forget to unmute if you'd like to speak.
All right. Well, if anybody has anything, I guess we can share our emails on through Karen. Karen's got the whole list, everybody, and if anybody has any ideas about signing, I mean, we have a county environmental health separate sign that we post along the beach, and at many spots where we don't have our water quality signs, but it would be good to incorporate that somehow. And I just was looking for some input on that, if anybody had any.
Well, if I could just chime in on it. This is Cynthia Bartis from Alameda County Environmental Health. In terms of swimmer's itch, we've had 16 reported cases and then one more alleged case. So that's our total cases for the last, since the outbreak started in the middle of June.
Great, thanks for that, Cynthia.
Yes, thank you.
Hal and Cynthia, do you guys are you experiencing more this year than previous years? Are you concerned?
No, I would say we're experiencing slightly more than we have, but Karen, this is a very cyclical thing. Some years we have almost none, and then this year I would say is a little bit more medium in terms of the numbers of cases that we've got reported to us and to the Park District.
All right, thanks for that. Anyone at the moment who wants to talk about that, feel free later, either when we come to a break, we can discuss that further, and we can always email back and forth, and you can use the chat function as well. I got a bunch of emails since I did the roll call, and I emailed out the Zoom call-in information. So if you're listening and you would like to participate verbally, feel free to email me and I'll send that to you. I'm not going to go back through the roll call, but if you do speak up, please announce your name and your agency just so that we know. And does anyone have any non-COVID-19 related topics that they would like to talk about through that discussion?
Yeah, how about, this is Diane from San Francisco.
Sure.
Any talk about variants for the co-alert or any updates on how the fecal is going? Or
yeah, thanks. And Donna from Monterey County, I know that you also had questions about that. So at this time, the State Water Board does not have guidance on whether you should or should not be using Colialert 18. We don't want to make everyone do a complete overhaul of their laboratory analysis methods because we don't have guidance to allow it or discontinue that method. So if you do use Colialert 18, please continue to do that. If you are making some changes anyway and you're going to move to, say, membrane filtration, feel free to do that as well. But the Water Board is not requiring a change away from Colialert 18. Just some background information that I found while looking into this. So California is one, if not the only state in the country that still requires testing for total coliform and fecal coliform in marine waters. So this is one of the reasons why Colialert 18 is not an approved method with the EPA, because no one actually needed that test to be an approved test method since they're all using enterolert testing for enterococcus. And if a method is not EPA approved, it won't be ELAP accredited either. So that's kind of a prerequisite for that. So we don't have any guidance now as to what methods you should or should not be using. I don't know if anyone else wants to chime in on this topic.
This is Kat Walsh. I'm Karen's supervisor. I just wanted to take a second to mention that we recognize this is a very important issue. Unfortunately, over the past year and a half, we've been working on a few time-critical, high-priority projects that are statewide projects. And so that has diverted most of the staff in the Ocean Standards Unit. And that's one of the reasons why we have not been able to move any guidance forward more quickly. There are also some actions that we're waiting on from ELAP in order to further develop guidance. We do have a Sea Grant Fellow this year. Her name is Kira Tuso, and she will be looking into this more this fall, and hopefully we'll start moving forward with developing our guidance and looking into bacteria testing method alternatives and recommendations. I also want to note that in addition to what Karen mentioned as far as issues with Kohler 18, we also know that this method tests E. coli at a different temperature that is not recommended, and that there's also the occurrence of false positives in saline water. So that is something that we're looking into and considering when we're evaluating Kohler 18 as a testing method for this program.
Thanks, Kat. Anyone else want to subject?
Hi, this is Donna Ferguson. The reason why California continues to monitor for total and fecal coliforms is because we have over 30 years of historical data with those numbers. And as a microbiologist, I have to tell you that it's better to test with 3 indicators versus 1, irregardless of what the EPA says. And we've looked at a number of beaches in California, and we've seen that, you know, at some beaches, it really does give us more information about where the contamination is coming from. So I don't think this information is being relayed or considered in discussions with ELAP, and I think it's really important. I've heard from ELAP that for now, they are not, they are not asking labs to discontinue testing. They had been during their inspections, and they were actually asking some labs to, write a corrective action. And so I've heard from Christine that they are no longer doing that. So this is an important issue. We need to that we need to resolve at some point.
So if it's possible, if you could send us a little summary of information you just provided and some additional information and send it to both myself and Karen, that would be really helpful. And we'll save that to our files for when we continue to work on considering how to develop the guidance and working with ELAP.
Okay, will do. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for that information, Donna. And I do just want to mention that there is the option, if we decide to pursue it, to get CoalAlert 18 as an EPA approved method. That would be time intensive, it wouldn't be immediate, and we would be working with the EPA on that, but that is an option. It's not that it didn't pass, it's that no one ever attempted to get it as an approved method. So we're also looking into the possibility of that, just so you're aware.
Yeah, and I just want to add the caveat that it's not guaranteed that we can move forward with that process. The ELAP accreditation can be done on a lab by lab, case by case basis, but if there's a larger, more sweeping accreditation, it has to be done at the statewide level. And as Karen mentioned, that's a very time intensive and very rigorous process, and it's not guaranteed.
Thanks, Kat. Hal, I see your comment in the chat there asking if you can get a state statement about Coal Alert 18. And I think that is something that we're working on, but we're still going through the information that we have and looking at viable options and discussing internally. But I believe that eventually when we've come to a decision, we would provide a statement. Kat, I'm not sure if you'd like to mention anything related to that.
Yeah, we'll consider making a statement. If you're by a state statement, you mean a statement from the State Water Board, we can look into that. It's a little complicated because we will be working with ELAP, and so whatever we do, we should not overstep what ELAP recommends. But we'll do what we can. What it may come out as is just some guidance.
And we've also been working with CDPH. That's another complexity. It's not just the State Water Board and not just the Division of Water Quality. It's multiple divisions in the State Water Board, us, and the Department of Public Health. So we are working on it, and we appreciate your comments and your information. Does anyone have any other comments about that topic or other topics that they would like to discuss? Go ahead.
This is Hal McLean. Yeah, you know, we get total coliform from Coal Alert 18, and you know, basically we have these spikes in total coliform that keep our 30-day geometric mean like above the state limits basically all summer, and then we get kind of a poor review from Heal the Bay, and so it's kind of it seems like it's not a very good indicator of what is really a health concern. And you know, I appreciate the fact that there's a big data set, but I also feel like it's not a very good indicator. So I don't know. I understand people use it to calculate fecal, which is kind of an interesting idea, especially if it's, you know, giving you high numbers. And I don't know if people that use it to calculate fecal are having issues with it of having I don't know, extra advisories because of that.
Well, so this is Donna Ferguson. So what you just told me is that, you know, your total coliform data is giving you information, because if you're seeing exceedances largely due to total coliform and not fecal or enero, that is an indication that, yes, you have something else going on. More likely it's, you know, the naturalized total coliform bacteria that are giving you problems. So from a microbiologist perspective, you know, when you look at all three, during a sewage spill, all three indicators are high. If you get exceedances mostly due to enterococcus, that's also an indication to us that you have something else going on with, you know, maybe regrowth or naturalized bacteria. That's why we like to see the data from all three, because it's when all three are high, that actually gives us more, you know, it's weight of evidence that you've got sewage. You may have a sewage problem. So that's the danger of just relying on a single indicator.
Yeah,
so
but
in your case, if you know that total coliforms are a problem, you may want to just discontinue. And, you know, you've got years of data showing that it's not all three.
Right. Yeah.
Sure, thanks, Donna.
Good point. Thanks.
Yeah, and I think that's also kind of a discussion about overall what indicators we should use, what testing methods we should use, how we should measure the geo mean. So of course, you're probably all aware that the bacteria provision passed recently in the last few years and updated the California Ocean Plan bacteria thresholds. However, for the beach safety monitoring program, which is largely what we discuss about here and what all of the grantees for the beach safety monitoring program test for the Title 17 bacteria threshold, which was developed by CDPH. So this is one reason why we're working with them on testing methods. So though the State Water Board updated the bacteria provisions, it didn't change the Title 17 threshold. So this is definitely a larger long-term discussion. I know the Water Boards is going to be having that we could potentially discuss at future meetings here about, can we change Title 17? Should we change Title 17? Should we change the geometric mean, all those things? And these aren't easy questions to answer. And I'm not a microbiologist, but what I've learned from you all is that, you know, the testing methods aren't perfect. And of course, developing regulations to use testing methods is always behind the available technology that we have. So what emerging technologies do we have and testing methods that we could use? Should the state require people to switch? Because of course it takes a long time and money and training to switch your lab to another testing method. So these are very loaded questions. I personally am very interested in them since I've been looking into this, and I appreciate all of your feedback and information on this. But yeah, how I appreciate Donna's comment about total coliform giving you information, and perhaps you should look further into why are we getting just the total coliform exceedance and not fecal and entero. And I know that Santa Cruz has experienced some strange spikes where something total will not exceed, but their fecal will exceed, which doesn't make sense. So looking at the data and saying, well, what could this possibly be? What can we address? And what can we learn from this data?
Right. And I also think it's important to keep in mind that all the testing methods have limitations. With all of them, you're going to see false positives and false negatives, not just CoAlert 18. And we're seeing that now with COVID testing. With patient specimens, we're seeing a lot of tests that are have very low sensitivity and specificity. Unfortunately, that's mainly what we have right now, except for those few labs that can do the PCR methods. But we use those tests and we look at the patient symptomology and we match those. We to interpret the test result, you've got to look at the patient's symptoms. And in the same way with these environmental methods, we can't just look at the numbers. We've got to look at, does it make sense given the environment that we're sampling from?
And do you have a better recommendation for a total coliform test than, we're trying to be rapid and posting our data, but if we went to membrane filtration or MTF, then it might take a week for us to get results. And
right, I don't recommend the MTF. If you can do membrane filtration and you're really interested in the total and fecal coliform data, that would be our preference because it's a little more specific. You can actually do further work on the bacteria that you're able to isolate from a water sample to identify it to species. So that's why we like membrane filtration, but I realize it's not practical for most laboratories. So, you know, as I said, in your case, you've got historical data showing that it's total coliforms. You may want to have a reference lab identify what species those are, and that, you know, consult with the microbiologist and they can give you a little bit more insight as to what could be happening. So that's a consideration. And then, you know, determine then if you want to continue or not. And that, you know, we can talk offline about that more later if you'd like.
That'd be great. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
And Donna, this is Diana. I'd love to talk offline with you too.
Sure. Yeah. Just call or email me.
All right.
Great, thanks. Yeah, this is a great discussion. This is exactly why I like having these meetings, and I'm glad that we can have the northern and southern groups all together so we can network and collaborate. So if you all start kind of an email chain about this discussion, I'd love to be included. And this is an idea that I had a while ago when I started with this group. Hasn't come to fruition yet, but I think it would be interesting if we could share resources between counties and agencies, especially neighboring ones. Because I know, like what Donna said, you know, marine filtration is not practical for all labs, or not all labs have the ability to do qPCR at the moment. But if you're interested in getting more of that kind of information, perhaps there's a lab nearby that you can share with, you know, send them a sample and get it tested, things like that. So I don't have any good ways that we could do that. If you have suggestions about that, that would be great. I had thought of, say, posting on the website. People can post what resources they have available to them if they're willing to share. Just the thought to put that out there. If you ever are interested in asking the group a question, feel free, and I can consider if we pose the question to the entire group outside of when we have these meetings. You know, they're not monthly or quarterly. So if you have questions in between the meetings, feel free to contact me. I'd love to be kind of a switchboard operator to put people in touch. I see Marissa Sensulo on the chat has a question if anyone has been using qPCR. Marissa, I'm not sure if you have all pose your question for you, if anyone wants to answer that.
So this is Matt with the County of Santa Cruz. We have been running side by side along with our defined substrate IDEX testing for EnerAlert EPA method 1609.1 for detection of Enterococcus by qPCR, and that's sort of, we're a month into that, but running side by side with those two tests to get sort of an idea with this beach season, sort of how those tests compare.
Thanks, Matt. And Joe from Orange County, I do see his comment as well in the chat, which everyone can view the chat, by the way, because I shared some links earlier and Joe's links, so feel free to click on those directly. And I see Donna has shared her contact information. Joe shared a guidance document from ELAP when it was still under the Department of Public Health, which came out in 2000, which is now 20 years old, if you can believe it. So I think while this document is still available, I think that there has been a lot of changes since 2000. The most important being that ELAP was transferred to being under the State Water Board. So we're looking into operational changes and things like that. So it's a good starting point for guidance, but things might change, though they haven't officially yet, just to kind of address that document. And Joe, I've seen lots of other people reference this document as well. Does anyone else have any comments, concerns, questions, non-COVID related topics before we get into that topic, which might be a hefty Is there any talk of monitoring more chronic issues like endocrine disruptors or microplastics? Kat, I'm not sure if you would like to discuss our work on microplastics at all.
I can touch on it. We identified it as an issue in our 2019 review of the California Ocean Plan, and at this time we are collaborating with our agency and scientific partners such as the Ocean Protection Council and SCORP to keep engaged on the ongoing research into microplastics and any developments. At this time, we're not in a position to take this project on. I will note that the Division of Drinking Water at the State Water Board has adopted, well, the State Water Board adopted the Division of Drinking Water's definition for microplastics in drinking water. And the next step for the Division of Drinking Water will be to propose standards for microplastics in drinking water. So at this time, as far as water quality in ambient waters go, we have not moved forward with that project. And Karen, I recommend that we move on to the next item.
Okay. Yeah, if you have any other questions or comments that you'd like to make that we don't get to, feel free to email them to me. Becky, I was going to say, I believe I heard that SCORP has done work with endocrine disruptors. I don't want to, but feel free if you guys want to connect offline and discuss that. I was just thinking that that was something.
So Karen, I'm sorry, you're fading in and out a little bit for me. Can you mention the name of that person again?
Oh, sure. I'm sorry. That's Becky.
Yeah.
I think SCORP, the Coastal Water Research Project, has done work on endocrine disruptors. I'm not 100% sure. I don't speak for them. But if you connect with them offline to tell you more about that, or if they have information on it.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Sure. I see some other comments about this. The meeting is being recorded, by the way, and I will save the chat information. So if people would like to reference some of this information later, we can do that. Yeah, so we have 10:55 to discuss COVID-19. So Kat requested that we move on to that subject now. And if we, before that time, we can certainly go back to some of these other questions. So this is the new normal. We are living with COVID-19. So my first question for the group, what rumors have you heard about COVID-19, specifically relating to beach going and water quality?
This is John from Orange County. I think one sort of the rumor started when I think a study in LA where either a research, I think it's LA Times report, but cited probably a professor from somewhere that there could be impacts, because of the either sewage ocean outfall or other, storm runoff that could pose a risk to beachgoer. That's probably a few months ago, but now I don't know the status, but that caused some concern for the public.
Yeah, thank you. I do believe I read that article and someone had shared it to me. I'm not sure if anyone else has seen any other local news articles in their area. And especially if you believe that these rumors are false, or at least if they were posted before we had more accurate information. What have your agencies been doing to dispel these rumors? Have you posted things on your website or posted signs at the beach, the public and beachgoers on going to the beach and water quality related to COVID? Thanks, Marissa. Shared the LA Times article. And I would like to share a resource that I know that we've referenced a few times on the My Water Quality website. It's from Surfrider. It came out relatively early during the shutdown, and it's a good article explaining COVID-19 and beach water quality. So if anyone else has any good resources that they've found, please share them. I'd like to hear, questions on, again, rumors, what you have heard. So I know that several counties had to close beaches, either restricting access or could not sample them. So I'm interested in difficulties with closing beaches and restricting the public access, because of course, when there's a will to go to the beach, people will find a way, regardless of what barriers you might put in front.
So this is Greg Smith with San Mateo County. I'm happy to jump in on this one because we're still having beaches that we can't access.
Oh, great.
And so, number one, we have a ton of state beaches that they, through different portions from our county health officers, order. Both the governor ordering state beach lots closed. They didn't want to close the actual beach because the Coastal Commission said you can't do that, kind of. But they did make it more difficult by closing the parking lots, both state beaches, county parks that had beaches, and county and city. City of Half Moon Bay controls parking lot for some beaches. And all it did was push people off into the neighborhoods and along Highway 1 and made things, almost made it worse. And then over 4th of July weekend, they actually did close the beach, even to locals, the beach and portions of the coastside trail along the bluff tops above the beach. It's made it very difficult for us to sample a lot of the beaches when we cannot legally park anywhere to get to the beach to sample it. And that's been for quite a bit of the shelter in place since mid-March. And we still have beaches. For example, one of the beaches that's on the beach bummers list, which was a surprise for everyone, I think, was Fitzgerald Marine Reserve. We still can't access that beach to sample it. It's a county park area, and it is closed off. So we don't have a way to go in. So it has made a lot of things difficult where we just don't know necessarily from week to week where we're going to have access. So, that's been our main concern, is just not being able to get the data.
Yeah, Greg, thanks for sharing that. Yeah, I would really be interested in knowing what other counties have had difficulties getting samples, of course, so that I can look and see on Beachwatch, oh, there's no data entered here. Why is that? So please email me if you are not able to collect samples at certain beaches and how long that's been and why, if that's because you can't park there, whatever the reason is. Is anyone else discovering difficulty sampling the beaches? And Bruce Hamamoto, I see your comment. The rumor that salt water and chlorine should kill COVID-19, so it's safe to swim. I believe I did read an article that said normal water treatment methods do work. So treated water that's discharged in the ocean would be safe. I'm not sure if anyone else has heard anything about that, or Bruce, if you have audio, if you want to speak up and mention anything.
No, I don't. This is Bruce. I don't have any information. That's just something I heard, and I was just wondering if anybody could verify or if there is concerns about catching COVID-19 from either swimming in a pool or swimming in an ocean or river.
Yeah, thanks, Bruce. Yeah, I don't know how I see your comment. I don't know if Allie Deem is on the phone call. Hal, do you know how recent Allie's research paper is on compiling information on viruses?
It was this year. Yeah, she, I mean, it just says that she thinks it behaves like another virus. And I asked her for guidance and what she would do. And she, said that masks and distance and that kind of thing was the most important. When I talked to her about that, or she sent me an email about it.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Lauren. I see your comment about the CDC has guidance for schools. I think that is included in the links that I sent at the very beginning from the CDC. Again, hopefully we can get a presentation from them later this year. I would love to see if Allie is able to talk about this as well. And UCI's Sunny is conducting research on COVID-19 water, potentially in stormwater. Again, I don't know if you have more details on that. That would be interesting.
This is Audrey. It's really an active research area, and I think there's a lot of uncertainty, but the general feeling is that the exposure comes through inhalation, and it coexists in water. If there's fecal contamination, certainly it could be there, but I think it's really, hard to make any strong conclusions one way or another.
Right, yeah, definitely the difficulty with this being such an active research project is the rumors, which is why I brought that up. Information gets posted as soon as there's an inkling of it, but how accurate is it? And does that cause more panic because there isn't really useful information? Like, there's a virus, we don't know how it spreads, please, what kind of panic does this information pose? I read something or discussed with someone about the ability for the particles to travel further, because if you're at the coast, at the beach, there's more wind. So is the 6-foot distance thing, if that's even maintained, is that even going to protect you from it? So I know that you really only need a few particles, a few cells of the virus in order to get it. So I'm not sure if people have seen, the distance it can travel. Diane said she had a concerned citizen contact San Francisco Public Utilities Commission, the communications group, inquiring about swimming in the ocean. Her doctor was more concerned, the concerned citizen's doctor was more concerned about other beach users exhaling droplets and had to wear a mask in the water. Yeah, I personally have thought of the concerns of wearing a mask in the water and if that's going to cause other issues such as drowning issues. And I think that Audrey touched on as well. I think the concern is more other people exhaling that you would breathe in and wearing a mask to protect against that.
Hi, this is Donna. So, I think it's going to be years before we know for certain about the transmissibility of the virus. outdoors. I can tell you from, the thousands of tests that we've done here in our lab, and we actually look at the patient data that comes with the specimens. For half the positive cases, those positive patients do not know how they got the virus. They were not in contact with, somebody that tested positive. And I think this rings true throughout, the country, that at least half the positive cases, we don't know how they got the virus. And so until we do, when I go to the beach or I'm out hiking around outdoors, I wear a mask, and I would advise the same for everyone else. That you're going to have studies that come out and, say one thing, and then, 2-3 weeks later, another study that disproves those results. And we're going to see a lot of that happening in the future. So my recommendation is, yes, exactly what Ali said, social distancing and mask wearing.
Yeah, thanks, Donna. I think that is kind of the scariest thing with this, is that we don't know, and people are getting attention, they're losing attention on the issue of you need to continue to wear a mask. Just because you don't see anyone around you is tested positive and you think everything's fine, you could actually get it even though you don't see anyone that's positive. So I think that's just communicating to the public what we do and don't know and how to protect yourself. I think this is just a difficulty that scientists in general face in communicating with them. You get them to understand and actually follow through on 6-foot social distancing, and yes, to go to the beach on the 4th of July, but it's probably not safe, things like that. So I'm interested in, what messaging people have put on their websites or what they've talked to people about. Say if they're out trying to sample, come up to them and questions. Just to let people know who are listening in online, I am still occasionally checking my email. If you would like me to send you the Zoom call-in information so that you can verbally pose questions, that's the easiest for me, by the way. If you can just unmute yourself and pose your questions instead of just typing it in, but I am trying to keep track of the chat as well. Great, thanks. Hal shared Ali Beam's article.
So I have a question for the local agencies.
Marissa?
This is Kat Walsh. Oh. So I was wondering if anyone's taken a look at the data during the shelter-in-place order timeframe and compared it to pre-shelter-in-place, and if you've seen any differences in identification of fecal bacteria at your beaches or anything else in your water quality data.
Yeah, this is Diana Donahue in San Francisco. And I believe we've been seeing a bit more spikes of data at Candlestick Point State Park. But we also have a very large mobile homeless encampment there now. Otherwise, our data is looking the same.
Yeah, no, I'm not sure if anyone has done any correlation research between fecal indicator bacteria and COVID. So I'm not sure. I would assume that you could test for fecal and have low numbers, but it could potentially have COVID in that sample, and you wouldn't pick that up with that test. Marissa, do you have audio capabilities to ask your question verbally? Or at least mention the questions that you have gotten from the public when sampling? I would love to hear from other agencies as well. If people have come up to you when you're out there trying, they've asked you, or if you've received any other emails from concerned citizens. And related to that, what changes have you had to implement, either installing sanitizing stations or putting up barriers or fixing barriers, say at the beginning of the parking lot that people may have moved, putting up signs? I know that I've seen signs at beaches that say social distancing. So has all of your agencies put up signs up saying social distancing and things like that?
Hello, this is Lauren with Orange County. So we did have some beaches closed through the state, the cities and the county, but we did not do the closures, so we didn't put up any signage. There is a lot of signage at the beaches, but that is also not signage we've put up about social distancing in Orange County. Do we actually have the regulatory authority to put up signage about COVID and to actually enforce the closures if the specific health orders for the county don't call for that? Does this actually fall underneath Title 17?
I'm sorry, can you pose that question again? I didn't quite catch that.
Okay, so sorry, let me turn this down.
I heard how you said that the county has the regulatory authority to put up signs and enforce closures, but I didn't quite catch what your question was.
For COVID specifically.
Oh, you're asking if you do have the authority to put up signs related to your authority under Title 17.
With COVID, correct.
Okay. I would think that because you would have the authority to put signs up related to health and going to the beach, that you do, but I also don't know if there is some other ordinance or regulation out there that says you can only post about bacteria or something. That might require a little more digging, but I would think that you can post signs, at least that say the beach is closed. Has anyone else put up signs or not put up signs because they were concerned about whether they had the authority to do so?
Yeah, this is Becky Tuden from East Bay Parks. We what we did, I mean, we have a large number of hiking trails as well as recreational lakes, as well as some coastal beaches. And what we did was consult pretty intensively with our Alameda County health officers that were issuing the ordinance. So it spanned 2 counties, Alameda and Contra Costa County. So in deciding what to do in terms of what should be kept open and what should be kept closed, they really consulted with them. So our reservoirs and our indoor lakes are closed, but the swim beaches on the coast are open. And then the same thing on 4th of July or big holidays, they would close down parking lots because they felt that they didn't want people congregating in a parking lot, but would allow people to hike on the trails. But you're right, there are some unintended consequences with parking when that happens, which we also dealt with. And we have tons of signs up, and we're talking now about changing the signs because, you know, people just don't see them anymore, but there are tons of signs up about masks and 6 feet, as well as social media. We changed our dog leash policy. We used to allow dogs off leash, but now we said, no, you have to keep them on leash because if the dogs start running toward each other, then the people go closer. So, but it was done in concert with the health officers. We didn't do it under any other ordinances. And if there's a problem, we would ask the county to enforce it, not us. So to my knowledge, we haven't issued any citations for people not staying 6 feet apart or not wearing a mask.
Right. Thanks, Becky. Yeah, and I think that East Bay Parks is one of the unique grantees agencies in the Title 17 program, in that you aren't a county. There's 16 grantees, and you and the city of Long Beach are the two agencies that are not counties. So I would assume, I don't think Long Beach has called in, I would assume that they would only have authority over their city beaches. But yeah, you guys would work with those two county agencies that you work with. So that's interesting. But any county agencies, were you deferring to see if some other agency would be posting or concerned about regulations? David, thanks. I see your chat about a peer-reviewed article on public perception of health risk associated with beach water quality enclosures. David, is that a recent paper that discusses COVID?
Yeah, thank you so much. I actually published it in 2003, and I think it's relevant because the study was done on beach closures in the summer of '99, when we had the beaches closed for almost the entire summer due to elevated bacteria levels. And the beaches were closed, and then they were actually reopened for July 4th weekend. And so I was interested. In the time I worked with Sunny Zhang, we measured risk perception of beachgoers in Huntington Beach and Laguna Beach, just to find out. The reason that I bring it up, I think it's very important to find out how the public feel about this. This is a very much different situation because there are physical barriers being put up that keep people out of the water. And my own perspective on it also, in going to places like Laguna Beach, I saw that the lifeguards were wearing masks. And I think there are safety issues with having reduced staffing. And in Huntington Beach, my friend actually drowned while he was surfing in Huntington Beach. And so this stuff, it's all important how people think about having dogs on leashes and wearing masks and hiking. And I think there are so many important issues that we can really study. Donna made a great point that the transmissibility of the virus, this is going to be stuff that we're going to be studying. We won't know for years, but I think there are some great opportunities for collaboration to work with on doing research studies to kind of reinitiate these kinds of studies on how people behave and how they perceive risks associated with going in the water. And Jian made a great point that Sunny Zhang, her research that she's doing on COVID-19 and wastewater and potentially in stormwater, those can help inform future studies. So I see a lot of opportunities for research and collaboration with agencies. And
yeah, thanks, David. Does anyone else know of any up and coming research recently in regards to public perception and COVID, or redoing a study now related to COVID that might have been done in the past? I think the reduced staffing issue that you posed, David, is also really interesting, not just for lifeguards and public safety for beachgoers, but samplers and lab staff, and lab staff potentially being redirected to doing COVID testing as opposed to beach water quality testing. And of course, we're all working from home, so difficulty communicating with the public or other staff coworkers that we work with to get the information that we need and share it on a timely basis. I don't know if anyone has comments on issues related to that, having working from home or reduced staff.
This is Greg from San Mateo County. Early on in the shelter in place, we were one of the 6 Bay Area counties that really started the shelter in place, and our staff were not allowed to go out and do the field work. And that was for about a month and a half that we were not allowed to go out and do that work. We were, our office was closed and we were all teleworking, and so that was the end of that one. And it took a while for us to actually get to the point where they would let us send staff out. And we're still at the point where we're told if something, you know, even for inspections, if an inspection can be done virtually of any kind, then it has to be done virtually. We can't, you know, and that kind of stuff. But that, you know, getting back out in the field to do the beach sampling ended up being a big deal for us.
This is Lauren from Orange County. I just wanted to say we asked the same question when we first had the orders, and I believe CDPH had told us that we were still considered essential and that we were still required to submit the data and do all the sampling. So I had to send staff out to still collect as long as they could physically get to the site.
Right, and for San Mateo County, it was a little different because of our local health officer's order.
Okay.
That overrode anything the state wanted to say because it was more restrictive.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks for mentioning that, Greg. That's really interesting because, yeah, I know the State Water Board has mentioned that water quality testing was an essential business. So that's interesting to hear that Orange County was able to use that and say, we are an essential business. We do need to continue to go out and sample, versus San Mateo was not. So again, I like these meetings to be able to hear these different scenarios that counties and local agencies have. A lot of times either interpretation or just instructions that they're given are very different.
Yeah, this is San Francisco is more in line with Orange County. We went ahead and sampled all the beaches also, took the public health route since swimming was an accepted outdoor activity.
Mhm. I see a chat from microbiology department, which I assume is, if you have audio, do you want to speak about your research on SARS and CoV-2, which is the virus that causes COVID-19, for those of you? It looks like their SCORP is doing active research on untreated sewage in collaboration with Stanford. I will let you all read the chat instead of reading it outright. Is there anything else that people would like to discuss related to challenges with COVID-19 and beach sampling and working remotely and finding information to share with the public and dispelling rumors?
This is Hal McLean, East Bay Parks. I was just happy that, I mean, it's difficult in our lakes to keep to monitor how many people can get there, and our lakes have been closed, but I was definitely concerned. We had a number of sewage spills in March, April area, and I was really looking for information on how the survivability of it in both freshwater and salt water. And, you know, I think actually it's been difficult for us to keep our lakes closed. We have people breaking into our swimming facilities and at all times of the day and night. But you know, if we had those things open, it'd be hard to keep people. They would be probably swamped. And I was really concerned about, you know, what the survivability is, and I don't know. It looks like it's not any crazier than any other virus, and that's nice to hear or to think. But I still want to get more information, and I think we still have a long way to go with this.
Thanks, Hal. Yeah, I agree with that. And Donna mentioned it earlier that we have a long way to go, and it's going to be years of dispelling rumors and conducting research and getting more accurate information and how we share that with the public. Marissa, I see your chat on if the water board supports us, meaning counties, posting signs such as those found at the CDC website. Kat, I'm not sure if you would like to talk about the water board supporting counties posting signs. I do not think that we are against it. I don't think we are requiring it.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on if you're requesting like a formal statement of support from the State Water Board. We would have to run that through our management executives to just confirm before we put out a formal statement of support.
Yeah, and I'm wondering on a different topic, unless someone else would like to speak about that. If anyone has found information on survivability of the virus, either in fresh or salt waters. I've seen that question before. Hal just briefly mentioned that. I'm not sure if there is enough information available yet.
Yeah, Ali Boehm's article kind of touches on that and the size of the virus and the type of virus and how viruses, you know, deal in water. But you know, it could be there could be an anomaly.
Great. Are there any other questions that people would like to pose related to the COVID discussion? If not, I can jump back to some of the earlier questions that we moved off of that are not COVID related. I see that Jen mentioned earlier about endocrine disruptors. Would you like to speak up related to that? You mentioned that you don't usually use that term for monitoring. And we also had, I think it's SCORP that's labeled about ELAP changing under the water board and the data that was used to approve IDEX for use in California And then the mention of false positives, while they're not preferred, of course, are more protective than false negatives, which is really the concern because that puts the public at risk. Donna, would you like to discuss about the various studies that recall different survivability rates for fecal indicator bacteria?
Right. So, you know, over a 30+ period of years, there's been different studies conducted all over the world showing different survivability rates for fecal indicator bacteria. And because it's, you know, dependent on the environment, the you know, the viability of the bacteria themselves. There's differences of strains within species, within the genus, within the group of the total and fecal coliform. So it makes it very difficult to compare. And it will be the same with the virus, SARS-CoV-2, even though it's a coronavirus, it's a new coronavirus, you know, that we're still going to be learning about in the next few years, you know, with and potential to mutate. So I think we have to be careful. The main point I want to emphasize is not to rely on just a few studies and to, you know, draw conclusions early on. I think this is what's causing a lot of anxiety about COVID is the fact that, you know, almost every week we're learning something different or, you know, a study that refutes a previous study. And this is normal. This is what's going to happen when we're dealing with something, you know, a new emerging pathogen or, you know, organism. So just to be cautious. That's the point I want to make. Just don't rely on a single study.
Yeah, thanks, Donna. That touches on what I'm always thinking about is how do we dispel the rumors from the public? How do we explain, oh, this study refutes a previous study, and releasing information too soon and increasing the public anxiety, and then potentially having to do damage control later on when new information comes out. You know, I'm interested over your area, but news or information people might have seen about COVID, and then concerns with how am I going to explain this to the public when I get questioned. It's very interesting, a lot of the stuff that's been released. In the chat, there was in response to the question about labs using qPCR. Ifori, I'm not sure if you have audio, if you'd like to speak up on that.
Hi, can you hear me?
Hi, yes, great,
Okay.
thanks.
This is Emma Fiore, microbiologist at the Monterey Bay Aquarium. I spent a couple years ago, working on the EPA, or working on getting the EPA Enterococcus protocol to work in our lab. And we generally run about 10 to 15 or 20 samples for, we usually use IDEX, the CoAlert 18 and EnterAlert each week. And after a lot of tweaking and trying to get the qPCR protocol to work for us, you know, I was finding one very low correlation to culture, well, to the IDEX results. I think that can possibly be related to the fact that, you know, in the aquarium, we are testing water both outside of the aquarium, you know, the ocean water, as well as tanks within the aquarium. And we rely a lot on UV sterilization to manage bacterial levels in the water. So, of course, qPCR will give you numbers for all cells, whether dead or alive, and not just the living cells like the culture techniques will. So, it's very, very hard to find correlation between the IDEX and the qPCR results. But ultimately, with our relatively low throughput, it just didn't make sense to put in the time and the effort to maintain the standards and reagents and all the extra pieces that needed their own culturing and quantification and whatnot, that needed to be redone, to keep them fresh every, what was it, I think every month or so. And so, and then of course the cost of the reagents and the plastics, used for qPCR, it ended up that it was just it cost a lot more money per sample to do that, and ultimately didn't get us really any faster of results, because it would still take most of the day to do the extraction and run the qPCR and analyze the results. And by the time we got that, it would still be pretty much the end of the day. And if we're relying on IDEX, it would, we would get IDEX results the next morning. So for us, it just didn't make sense in the long term.
Sure, Anna, thanks for bringing that up. And you said you didn't find a correlation. Does that mean that you found both IDEX and qPCR methods were they were both accurate and serving the purpose that you used them for to test the water quality?
I wouldn't say accurate. I think I could have put more work into the qPCR to dial in the accuracy, but I kind of was looking forward and decided it's not worth the effort to continue. But by correlation, I meant that if we had samples that were above the threshold with IDEX, they did not correlate to being above or below the threshold. Well, I guess there's not. What?
Okay, yeah, sorry, my question was a little confusing. Yeah, so basically you found that IDEX is the same amount of time that will give you information on whether what your water quality is. It's not really worth the extra cost for what any extra information you're getting on our test.
Yes, exactly.
Has anyone else observed that or thought this to be true in their labs? I know Santa Cruz, you guys are doing IDEX and qPCR comparison testing side by side. I'm interested in your thoughts about that.
Yeah, we're only about a month in. There was sort of a initial month that we had set, running standard curves, initial demonstration of capability and everything like that. Currently, we have the method down. We go out and sample in the morning, 7, 8 o'clock, and typically have results by around 3:30 or 4, which, at the beginning of the method, there are pieces of it that I believe we could do quicker, so that we could probably have results by 1 to 2. And this is with sampling 10 sites, currently sampling 10 sites, and getting those through the extraction process and everything like that. So it remains to be seen for us whether whether it ends up being worth the effort and money and whatnot. But yeah, so that's sort of what we're taking this summer to do, is compare the two. But currently, yeah, it's about I don't know how many hours that is, but it's a morning sampling with afternoon turnaround.
This is Audrey. I just want to add to what Matt said. And it's been sort of a COVID advantage because we've been able to focus on the entero testing since we haven't had access to some of the beaches. But the other sort of irony of the whole thing is the water's been pretty clean during this whole testing phase. So we aren't getting hits from either method. But this week, we got hits from both methods, but it was like the first time we've seen a positive entero in the beach water. So, but we're really trying to compile a lot of QC data, and I guess at the end of the summer we can kind of give a summary of what we found.
Right, yeah, and that would be interesting too, to see the difference between pre and post-COVID beach attendance and water quality, similar to what Kat posed the question of earlier. Matt, I just want to clarify, you were saying that you would get results by 1 or 2 p.m. for the IDEX method or the qPCR method?
That's for qPCR. Our IDEX methods will still be, next mid-morning of the next day.
So the advantage for us is that if we suspect there's an issue, we can go out and resample. Since we have, our poster child Cowell Beach here, we really try to resample if we see elevated counts. So that gave us kind of a heads up early enough that we could go and get another sample. But it would be actually kind of neat if we could set up maybe a little kind of, I don't know if I want to call it a work group, but just kind of a group of people to share knowledge on and experience on this testing, and maybe do some split sampling and that sort of thing. Could be interesting to kind of iron out some of these issues.
Yeah, I think that would be a great topic for a group discussion. I could potentially look into that for the future, having a small offshoot group. Have you guys noticed any difference that is apparent pre and post COVID with Cowell Beach specifically, since I know you've mentioned this as the poster child?
Crowds. It's very crowded, and kind of to get back at what others were saying earlier, when beaches are closed, people go to ones that are open, and so it's kind of like this cat and mouse game. So it's been crowded, but in terms of the water quality, nothing dramatic. I mean, July is always kind of the month where we do see elevated counts, the water temperature is higher, more people are around. So nothing that jumps out from that perspective. The other things people have mentioned about encampments and other sort of factors that might affect the water quality, that's certainly happening in different ways. So it's kind of hard to tell directly, but we're watching all these different things, and we're then that's where you can kind of use source tracking, which is, I guess, the topic for later. But yeah, we're paying close attention to all these things because we have to.
Right, great. And Santa Cruz, while I'm getting you to talk, I'm not sure, Audrey, if you have any information on other studies you were working on related to, say, the whitening agents in the water and getting positives for, I believe it was E. coli, but negatives for total coliform we've discussed before.
Yeah, so that's another thing we're really using COVID to kind of get our lab methods really more refined, because we just have to do different types of staffing and different scheduling. So the optical brighteners, that's one thing that we've been observing, that when we see, so we're trying to get baseline data for the different beaches, and when we see elevated, we don't have enough data to really put together strong statistics yet, but we do see when the bacterial counts change, the optical brightener levels change. And so that's kind of neat, because it's a pretty quick test. So it's another kind of early warning that maybe we might want to resample or do some more investigation. So still a work in progress, but again, by the end of the summer, I think we'll be in pretty good shape to put a lot of these different factors together.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks. Perhaps you can share the results with this group at a future meeting. Yeah, if anyone is interested in potentially participating in a group that could look at comparing bacteria testing methods, either comparing IDEX methods and qPCR, or I'm thinking potentially discussing the multiple fecal indicator bacteria, total and fecal, that we discussed a bit earlier, and the ColAlert testing method, I foresee those as kind of topics we could have in a little offshoot group. Please email me if you're interested and what potential topics you'd like to talk about, so I can put together some information if and when we could have this breakout group do some discussion. Is there anything else to discuss good resources, research papers, or websites that they found. Rumors with COVID-19, researching endocrine disruptors and water quality. And are there any other comments that people would like to bring up, things that we would normally talk about at this meeting during the intro session when we go round robin and say, hi, this is so-and-so from this county. Hey, we've experienced, for example, swimmer's itch. We'd like to talk about that. Or, hey, this is a new update with our else had this going on. If anyone would like to pose any comments like that to the group while we have everyone together.
This is Hal McLean from East Bay Parks again. One of our freshwater beaches has been having spikes in E. coli, and we're just doing total in E. coli at our freshwater beaches. And I think it seems random enough and it seems consistent enough that we wanted to get into some source tracking, and I'm trying to set something up like that. And if anybody has had some good source tracking experience or recommendations, I'm interested in that. I know Allie did some stuff, and some other folks did some things too. Eric Dubinsky, and I'm in the process of reaching out to them, but I thought they'd be on this call today for some reason.
Great, yeah, thanks for posing that question. I will look and see if I have any more emails from people about requesting access.
So, Al, this is Donna. You know, source tracking studies are quite expensive. Do you have funding for that?
It kind of depends.
Because because the methods are so expensive, you may want to just, have you done like a sanitary survey? Just, going around observing for possible point and non-point sources on your own?
We have, and we've had a couple issues. We had a lift station issue, and but and that was associated with some of our high numbers, but and that was an SSO, but that's also a lake where we have chronic SSOs from the neighborhoods that feed into that lake. And we do test the waters that feed into that lake, and we don't necessarily get spikes in those very often.
Okay. Yeah, so that's good that you've identified potential sources and you've done sampling upstream and downstream. But have you done that on a regular basis? Because you could start by doing some of that work yourself, just because, like I said, when you get into source tracking, now you're talking about PCR methods for various markers, which can get quite expensive. So probably the best thing is to do what you can using the bacterial methods to try and narrow it down, to just a few potential sources. And then once you've identified those, then consider, conducting a microbial source tracking study. But at the very least, it's going to cost you, between $50,000 and $100,000 to do a decent study, and that's for 1 year. And ideally, you'd want to do multiple years.
Right.
So, thank you for telling us that. I think what's happening is we have a lake. This is Becky from East Bay Parks, by the way. Sorry. We have a lake, and most of the lake is fine. in terms of meeting E. coli numbers, but then there's some places right by the beach. So the inlets where we're monitoring are not exceeding bacteria, but then it gets to the beach where there are no known inlets, and those are on and off screaming high. So we were trying to figure out whether we could just figure out whether it was bird versus human, just to see if we should look more close.
So it's very difficult to quantify the source using the bird and human markers. I mean, basically it's going to tell you presence, absence. Yes, you have bird. Yes, you have human. And you really don't need to do PCR testing for that, because you know you're going to have those sources, you know. So if you think it's, I would focus on the human source and trying to remediate that. If you've identified what you think is the human source, then you know you could do sampling using the human marker to try and get an idea based on the number of samples that come up positive, whether that's your primary source or not. But you know, so you're seeing spikes in, is it E. coli mainly, or total E. coli?
Yeah.
Okay, because you know E. coli can also grow in the environment as well. So
I don't want to take up everyone's time, and unless they're very interested, maybe we could talk offline, because we would really appreciate your help on that if we could. I'm happy to continue it. I just don't want to, you know, it's really up to other people whether they want to go into this level of detail with us.
okay, just trying to educate everyone at the same time.
So I think it's fine. This is Karen. I think it's fine.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, keep talking then.
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, just to bear in mind that, you know, these spikes, if you've got a sewage source or a persistent source, then you're going to see, you know, more consistency in the spikes. But if you get random spikes, that makes me think, you know, it could be animal, like, you know, regrowth. It could be some other explanation for those random spikes. But usually when it's, you know, sewage, you're going to detect persistence. So you may want to do more frequent sampling just to establish, is it really random versus consistent?
Okay, that's a good point. I mean, we're hoping there shouldn't be any sewage in the lake. So the fact that there's human sewage in the lake would be something we would want to know. I mean,
okay, so you don't have a homeless population, or you don't have people, you know, defecating nearby.
I don't think in that area. No, I mean we can double check that, but I don't think so.
So those are things you could do as part of your sanitary survey. You know, that's where you're going to save yourself some money, because if you hire a consultant, they would do the same thing.
Right.
Yeah, I was thinking that perhaps there's a homeless encampment maybe upriver a little bit, and discharges, you know, or runoff is going in, and so it's not immediately next to the water and you might not see it. I know that I have in the past received kind of a ping from consulting firms or whatever who are looking for data and ways to do testing methods and looking for partners. So I could see if I could find some of those older emails and share that information, you know, a company that wants to partner with someone, you know, at a low or no cost so that they can get data and then they can help you out. And hearing this presentation showing that while there is frequently going to be high bird markers, the bird, and Donna, you can correct me if this is an incorrect statement, but the bird source is less likely to infect humans compared to the human source. So I would think that focusing on whether it's a human source or not would be the most important, because if it is mostly bird, then it's understandable why it's elevated, but it's also not a large public health concern.
Right. If you do enough sampling, you're going to detect bird DNA. There's no question. So I wouldn't spend a lot of money on that particular marker, and I would focus on identifying the human sources, if there are any.
Yeah,
and if there's not, then I mean that gives you information there too.
Right. I mean, I think the interesting thing is that so we're in a dry period. There shouldn't be any runoff per se, except for urban slobber. And we don't have any, where we're getting the high hits is we don't have any outfalls that we know of. So if there's, we do have some underground infrastructure there, that building is supposed to be closed because of COVID, so there shouldn't be any use. Yeah. Is there another way to find out whether there's human sewage present? Because I think that would help us to know that, as opposed to just
Right. So like I was saying, but you're only testing for the two indicators, totals and E. coli, right?
Right. Yeah, cyanobacteria, but yeah.
Oh, cyanobacteria also. Okay. So you may want to, since you're doing E. coli already, and that suggests that it could be a human source, then you may want to consider using 1 or 2 human markers and doing more, more frequent sampling. Like I said, to establish, is it random or not, and how does it correlate with your E. coli concentrations?
Right. And I looked at a bunch of articles about how how dirty sand can be and how you can have regrowth and stuff. And I kind of wonder how much that affects it. And I guess it's hard to tell.
Right. Very difficult to tease out.
Yeah, this is interesting that it gets back to, testing methods not being perfect, and how can we work with what we know works well and what's available, and of course, not cognitive.
So, if you've done extensive studies, you've ruled out human sources, and you continue to get those hits, well, that pretty much tells you it's probably a natural source.
Wait, I'm sorry. Explain again why it's probably a natural source.
Because you've ruled out human sources, you've done the human marker testing, say, and you get non-detects, but you continue to see high total coliform or E. coli counts. That pretty much points to something else happening in the environment, a natural source, whether it's regrowth, whether it's vegetation, birds, animals.
And how much does that human marker testing cost?
PCR tests are generally about $100, per test, but it can range from 100 to 300. And some, like Source Molecular, they will give you a discount depending on how much testing you do.
Okay. And how often would you suggest sampling for that?
Good question. So it depends, on how many sites you have, because if you have a lot of sites, that's going to reduce the amount of sampling that you can do at one particular location. But there have been, studies showing that you need to actually do quite a bit of sampling to rule out a human source.
Hey, Donna, I have a question related to that. Should they prioritize sampling lots of different sites or sampling a few sites more frequently?
Yeah, so that's why I'm all about using the cheaper bacteria methods to narrow it down to just a few sites, and then do more intensive sampling there using the molecular marker tests. And then getting back to sampling frequency, I'm not a statistician and I don't necessarily agree with the publications out there that tell you, yeah, you need to collect, 100 or 300 samples because it's just not practical or affordable.
Yeah. Hi, this is Eric Dubinsky. I happen to be on the call too. We've done a few of these types of studies. And one approach that we've taken is, you can sample. I think I agree with Donna. You have to get a sufficient number of samples, but then select a subset of those to do the molecular tests on. So you archive, because they're DNA it's DNA that you're testing for. You can freeze the sample, and once you get your bacterial results, you can then test the ones that have high concentrations of bacteria versus a subset of some that don't. And if you see the human marker going up with the high E. coli count, so there's an association there, that tells you something. But you don't necessarily have to spend $100 on every sample that you've collected. You would really want to do a subset that you can, because if 95% of your samples are low counts, you don't need to do the molecular marker on all of those. That would be my approach to it.
Yeah, I agree totally.
Thanks, Eric. I'm glad that you're jumped on here. Someone also mentioned to me, and I've gotten information before, it's unfortunate that San Diego is not on the call unless you perhaps have joined since we started. I know San Diego is in partnership with some other groups doing qPCR testing. So I can look into that and ask them if they would like to share their meetings. They have meetings every so often where they discuss this. So perhaps that would be a good venue for a lot of you guys to jump in on that as well. So I will ask them about that information. So thanks all for the discussion. I think that was great and very useful for everyone to hear at once. I believe that this meeting is being recorded. Just for those of you on now, you can hear that. So hopefully we will be able to share or post this information. I know a few people have emailed and asked about whether this meeting would be recorded. At this time, I would like to take a short break beforehand so everyone can get some water, do whatever they would like in a few minutes. And if we can return at 11:10, we will have a presentation from Dr. Oren Shanks from the US EPA on human fecal source identification with cross-phage, which is a perfect topic to go into after this discussion. The webinar will still continue to run during the break, so if you do want to continue having, you are welcome to do so. Other than that, I will mute myself and we'll come back at 11:10. Thank you. All right, it is 11:10. So I will stop sharing. Oren, if you would like to share your screen. And let me just do a quick check. Everybody who is on the Zoom, hopefully you're all back because we're going to start. All right, Oren, take it away.
Okay, thank you. So my name is Oren Shanks. I'm a senior scientist with the EPA Office of Research and Development. And first, I wanted to thank the organizing committee for asking me to speak today about human fecal source identification with crass-phage. I think the idea for this talk came from a webinar that I spoke at earlier in the year where I had mentioned about crass-phage and some of the new research that's going on in EPA. And today I was asked to kind of take a deeper dive into that topic. So for the presentation today, it's organized into two parts. I'm going to start off with a little background on what fecal source identification is, just in case there are people on the call that aren't familiar with that terminology. And then I'm going to spend most of the time talking about Hodge, what it is, and the different research projects that are going on in the EPA towards developing a technology for using it in water quality monitoring. So as I'm sure you guys are all aware, fecal pollution is a nationwide challenge. Fecal microbes are the most common biological contaminant in coastal waters. And when they exist at unsafe levels, they represent a public health risk. They can lead to economic burdens and certainly impact the ecology of these different water systems. The primary tool that's used for regulating fecal pollution is a term called general fecal indicators. And so these are things like Enterococci or E. coli. These are types of bacteria that are harbored in the gut of most animals. So when you measure them in the water, they're giving us information about the total level of fecal pollution. And we know based on the level that we can make assumptions about the corresponding level of health risk for different types of water uses. But because they exist in the gut of many different animals, they don't give us any information about particular sources of pollution that might be a problem in a particular area. And for people whose jobs it is to identify these and mitigate them or maybe prevent them from happening in the future, having source information can be very valuable. There's a growing body of evidence in the scientific literature suggesting that different sources of fecal pollution can represent different levels of public health risk. And we certainly know that there can be different mitigation strategies depending on what pollution sources might be impacting a particular area. So you could imagine that if you're having issues with dogs or maybe with birds at a beach, you might do something very differently than if it is a stormwater outfall or a leaky sewer line. So source information can improve management and also public safety. So many decades ago, scientists came up with the idea of fecal source identification technologies that are basically designed to complement general fecal indicator monitoring. And basically the premise behind these types of technologies are the recovery and measurement of a host-associated identifier. And so this is another a term like general fecal indicator, but unlike that general fecal indicator term, these would be things that would be shed by a narrow group of animals or maybe even a particular species of animal, so that when we find them in the water, they give us information about a particular pollution source. These methodologies work in a way that's shown here in this flow chart, where you may have a body of water. I know that this is a picture of a beach on the East Coast, so I'm sorry I don't have one for the California coast for today. But you will sample a body of water, perform some type of concentration on that water sample, do a test that gives data. This data is going to give you information about a particular pollution source that can help direct more focused water quality management decisions. So you can imagine that if you had these types of tools available to you, that there are a number of things that you could do with them to help improve water management. You could use them to improve urban stormwater management. They could certainly be used in recreational beach settings. They can be used to evaluate best management practices that are put in place, especially for ones that are designed to mitigate a particular source of pollution. They can be used in waterborne disease outbreak response, as well as maybe even in hazardous event response. So most of the work that's been done to date on the development of fecal source identification tools has focused on bacteria. Out in California, you guys probably recognize like HF183, for example. This is a bacterial-based fecal source identification tool. But there's also another group of researchers that for a long time now have been saying that we need to also focus on virus-based fecal source identification tools. And some of the primary reasons behind that are that enteric viruses are a major contributor to waterborne disease in recreational settings. And there's evidence that suggests that viral targets may correlate better than bacterial indicators with these enteric viruses in terms of how they move around in the environment, in terms of how they survive and persist in the environment, in terms of how they react to different types of treatment that we might do to try to mitigate these enteric viruses. So the idea here is that if we can develop technologies that target viruses, that this might be another way to further improve water quality management. So this brings us to the main topic of the talk today, which is about crass-phage. I think crass-phage is the most recent virus-based fecal source identification tool that's been reported out in the literature. Crass-phage was discovered in 2014 by a research group out in California. And basically, it's a double-stranded DNA Bacteroides bacteriophage. So basically what that means is, unlike SARS-CoV-2, which is RNA-based, this is a double-stranded DNA virus. It's a bacteriophage, which in general terms means that it makes a living by infecting other bacteria. In this case, it's Bacteroides. And so this is very interesting for people that are fecal source identification experts, because HF183, for example, is a type of Bacteroides. Most top performing source tracking methodologies that we have that are bacterial based track some target within the Bacteroides group. Another thing that's interesting about crass-phage is how it was discovered. That's actually how it got its name. Unlike more traditional approaches where a virus might be isolated from culturing and then sequenced and named, crass-phage was discovered through metagenomic data mining, and using a process called cross assembly, hence the crass part of the name. So it's a very interesting and new way to discover new viruses, and it was a very clever paper. And what they found here was that they were able to identify a brand new 97,000 base pair-ish new Bacteroides bacteriophage. And when they went looking for it in metagenomic libraries generated from human fecal samples from the Human Microbiome Project, they saw that it was highly abundant and prevalent in these samples. Shortly after the discovery of the crass-phage genome, a group from University of Pittsburgh decided to take that crass-phage genome and look for it in other metagenomic DNA libraries that were available in public databases. And so at the time, they were able to find 86 of these different metagenomic libraries that represent 10 different environments. And basically, the general idea was to see what they could learn about the occurrence of crass-phage based on this way of doing analyses. So there's a couple things I want to point out from this study that were interesting. The first here is shown in the figure 1. On the x-axis, we have the different environments. So you see things such as sewage from different countries, from different continents, different types of animals, different types of water. On the y-axis, you have the number of crass-phage DNA sequence reads that map to those different libraries. And so some interesting things, were evident doing this analysis. The first thing is that crass-phage appears to be highly abundant in sewage, particularly in US and Europe, but that there appears to be some type of geographic variability in terms of when you go to other continents. Another thing that was interesting that they found with this analysis was it appeared to be absent in terrestrial animals that they could find, with the exception of bats. There seems to almost be an equivalent level of mapped reads in bats compared to what they were finding in sewage. And then they didn't find any evidence of crass-phage in these other types of samples. Another thing that was interesting that they found was they looked to other sewage-based viruses that we have genomic information for that are of interest, particularly for water quality monitoring. So things like pepper mild mottle virus, adenovirus, norovirus, to look to see what the relative abundance of crass-phage might be compared to these other more well-known viral targets. And so this is read in the same way. We have the different viruses on the x-axis, and we have the number of reads on the y-axis. And what really pops off the page here is that crass phage is tremendously abundant. It, based on this analysis, it's actually, if you take all those 5 other viruses combined, the crass phage is still over 100 times more abundant. And so for people that have worked with viruses, this is a really big deal, because when we try to isolate viruses in the environment, typically we have to work with large volumes of water and ultra concentration approaches in order to isolate them and recover them at a level that we can measure. But this is suggesting that that may not be necessary for crass phage. So the authors of this paper concluded that crass phage might make a good fecal source identification tool because it appears to be associated with human waste and it's highly abundant. So at this point, this is where EPA came onto the scene. We decided to collaborate with the University of Pittsburgh group to see if we could develop a crass phage water quality monitoring technology. We were able to publish this paper in 2017, and basically the experimental design that we followed is organized into 3 phases. And I'm going to talk about each one in more detail in the following slides, but just in general, phase 1 was surveying the entire 97,000 plus base pair genome to try to find the best regions that might be used for developing a qPCR methodology. In phase 2, the idea was to take those candidate regions and do systematic testing on them to find the most abundant and the most human associated to develop these qPCR methods. And then from there to adapt them into qPCR technologies and optimize them and assess their performance. So taking a deeper dive into this, for phase 1, as I mentioned earlier, crass phage is a double-stranded DNA virus. It has a little over 97,000 base pairs of genome that are depicted in this circular map here on the right side of the slide. And basically what we wanted to do is, we didn't know which marker or which part of the genome might be better than the other. So we decided that we needed to consider the whole genome. And the way we did that was kind of divided into 2 parts. One was, we knew we had the genome, and we know that we have information about bacteriophage genetics. We know things about the genomic architecture. We know things about some of the genes that are encoded on it and what they do. And so we can use that information to either include or exclude particular regions based on that information. And so in doing that, we were able to exclude 53% of the genome. But that still leaves over 40,000 base pairs left to find that 100 base pair stretch that is the best target for developing a qPCR method. So for that, we had to go into the lab and do lab work. And so the group that we worked with, we designed 384 primer sets that cover 90% of this candidate region that was left. And so down here, you can kind of see this flow chart where it summarizes what we did, and we have these 384 primer pairs now ready to move into phase 2. So in phase 2, basically, it was organized into 3 rounds. Each round is designed to test these candidate regions for their association with human waste, as well as their absence in other animals and their abundance. And with each round, it gets more and more stringent. So when we go through round 1, we take these 384 primer pairs, run them through a test, and we were able to exclude 327 of them, leaving 57 left. So then these 57 primers go through the second round, which includes a more rigorous set of tests to further explore these properties that we're interested in for developing a methodology. And from that, we were able to eliminate 51 primer sets, leaving us 6 that were left. And so then for round 3 is where we really throw the kitchen sink at them. We are evaluating things like specificity across 70 different animal samples. We're looking at geographic stability and sewage from different locations, and going out and testing them in the environment and sequencing what we're recovering to make sure everything's working right. And after doing all that, we were able to narrow it down to 2 primer pairs, or 2 genetic regions that we thought were the most human associated and the most abundant out of the entire genome. So with these two primer sets, this is where we go into phase 3, where we then adapted that endpoint PCR platform into a qPCR platform. And these assays are called CPQ56 and CPQ64. And so once we had developed these qPCR assays, we performed side-by-side performance comparisons with EPA methods 1696 and 1697, which equal HF183 and HUM-M2, just in case. And we did a number of different tests to evaluate how well optimized they are, what's their analytical sensitivity, how precise are they, can we recover them in different types of environments, and what is their occurrence in non-human sources. So the next couple of slides are going to show some more details about these types of experiments. So here is a table. I'm not going to really define what all these different metrics are, other than to say that these are things that give us an idea of how well the method is performing in terms of optimization, in terms of analytical sensitivity and precision. And basically the take-home message here is that these new crassphage technologies are performing every bit as good as the top performing EPA methods 1696 and 1697, and that we observe very high precision with less than 10 target copies per reaction with the new crassphage assays. A second thing that we looked at was we wanted to see how these new assays performed in sewage and in waters that we knew were impaired with sewage, and compare that performance to the EPA methods. And so here we have two scatter plots in panel A. We have the results from sewage. The way you read these plots is on the x-axis, we have the concentration, basically going from a lower to higher concentration from left to right. And then on the y-axis, we have the 4 different assays. And so here you can see that for the two crassphage methods in sewage, we're getting recovery and concentrations that are similar to that for HF183. And this is to be, this method is less sensitive, and this is what would be expected there as well. And we saw the same pattern when we went out into the environment and tested fresh waters that we knew were impaired with sewage. So the last thing I'll show you about this effort was our specificity testing. And basically the idea behind this is to try to understand what is the occurrence of these genetic markers in non-human sources. So in this table, basically we have a series of non-human sources that we tested, different numbers of individual samples, and then we have the results of whether or not we observed a measurement or a false positive, if you will, with these different assays. And so at the end of the day, kind of what we're interested in here is this specificity term, and you can see that it's 98.6 for the crassphage, and slightly higher for the bacterial methods. In a general rule of thumb that's out there is that if a fecal source identification method has 80% or better specificity, it has some potential use for water quality applications. And so these are scoring very high, and almost at a very similar level to the bacterial methods. It is interesting to note that we saw rare detections in dog. For example, we tested 41 dogs and we found it in one of the dog samples. It ended up being the same one for both of the assays, and 2 out of 25 of the gall. And this is almost to be expected. There's a growing body of evidence out there. Dogs cohabitate with humans. They sometimes drink water out of the toilet or get exposed to human fecal waste one way or another, and can rarely harbor human gut bacteria and excrete them in their waste. And the same thing with gulls. There's actually a study that just came out, I think about a year ago, using telemetry to follow gulls moving from a dump, and then they are catching these gulls and testing their stomach contents to confirm that they're eating fecal waste at dumps, and then also showed that some of those gulls fly back to beaches and hang out there. And so So it's a very interesting question why this happens. The important thing is that it appears to be rare and it's at much lower concentrations than what we find crassage in sewage. So with that, I want to turn our attention to a second study that actually I think is just coming out, where we were looking at the occurrence of crassage in untreated sewage across the United States. So basically for this study, what we did was we sampled 49 different wastewater facilities. There was an emphasis on looking at urban versus rural locations. We used a GIS stratified random site selection process to help us get a representative data set. But in addition, these samples also represent a useful gradient along longitude, latitude, facility elevation, as well as air temperature gradients, which gives us an opportunity to look and see how robust the occurrence of crassage is on a national scale. So in this study, I'm going to share with you a couple findings. One of them is here on the left in this violin plot. On the x-axis, we have the different assays, so the crassage assays and the EPA methods, and then on the y-axis, we basically have concentration. And so the first thing I want to point out is that crassage was found in every untreated sample without exception, just the same as the bacterial methods. And also this solid bar here, this represents the average concentration. The average concentration of crassage was higher than HF183, which was a surprising finding, an exciting finding, but not statistically significantly different because there is quite a bit of overlap. A couple other things I'll share is that the two crassage assays were highly correlated. They had an R squared of 0.991. Like, this is good enough to be a qPCR standard curve. So what this is telling us is that it's likely that both of these assays are measuring exactly the same thing. So if you're interested in doing research with one of these assays, you probably only have to use one of them if you want, and it's probably going to give you the same answer, whichever one you want to pick. The other thing that was interesting that I'll point out is that crassage was significantly correlated with the EPA methods, with HF183 and HUM-M2, with another very high R squared value. And so this is encouraging because we know a lot about these bacterial methods, and we know that they're very highly associated with human feces. So we're seeing a very high degree of correlation with crassage with those genetic markers. The other thing I'll point out from this study is the geospatial trends. And so I was mentioning how we had these gradients of wastewater treatment facilities basically going from sea level up to 1,200 meters above sea level. We have these different gradients moving from east to west and from north to south in different outside air temperatures. And basically, at the end of the day, without going into how to read this graph, the result was that there were no significant geospatial trends. And this is actually a good thing, because this means that that these crassage genetic markers, as well as the bacterial ones, we can expect to have similar levels of them regardless of where we're at in the country. So this is an encouraging thing, and a good thing if you're looking to try to find things that you might be able to implement on a national scale. So for the last couple of slides, I want to talk briefly about some ongoing research that's going on in EPA that just isn't at the point where I could go into it in more detail like the last two studies. So there's 5 different projects I'll share with you today. The first one is the development of a certified reference DNA material with the National Institute of Standard and Technology. So this is going to be very exciting for people who know about implementing qPCR methods. You know that standards are very important. And so having a national standard is going to help. Also wrapped in this study is a multiple laboratory performance study. And so that's going to be very nice to have that information for these technologies. We are also gearing up to do a large-scale field study in the Gulf of Mexico, looking at multiple marine recreational beach areas so that we can gather more information on the performance of these technologies in a marine water setting. We've also teamed up with some experts in quantitative microbial risk assessment to explore theoretical relationships between crass phage and public health risk. And then we are also doing a series of studies here in the Cincinnati area, looking at the attenuation of crass phage through different types of wastewater treatment trains, as well as going back to those same wastewater facilities weekly for a year to understand potential temporal variation or any kind of type of seasonality that could potentially occur with crass phage. So for the last slide I have here for the discussion part of this, I just want to point out, I've gone over crass phage. A lot of it seems encouraging, but there still are a lot of things that we don't know. And some of these things are pretty important. And that's understandable. These assays were just published in 2017. We've only had a couple years to do research on them to try to understand how well they perform. But I thought it would be interesting to just run off a list of some of the things that we still don't know. So for example, we don't know what the specificity of these methods are on a national scale. So there is some evidence that sometimes fecal source certification tools can perform better in one region than another. So those types of things haven't been looked at. We don't know for sure what the optimal water filtration and DNA recovery protocol is. We don't have a standardized protocol for these yet. We don't know what the performance of these methods are across laboratories. We have very little information on the persistence of these viruses once they get out into the environment. I think right now, there's only 2 papers published that have started looking into that question. We know very little, next to nothing, about the co-occurrence of crass phage with public health relevant pathogens, not only in sewage, but also in waters that, that we would be interested in managing. And then in addition, there's limited understanding on the potential links to public health risks. So what we found so far is encouraging, but we still have some things to do. So with that, I want to take the last slide I have to thank the research teams that were involved in the crass phage qPCR study and the geospatial sewage study. These guys are great, and they did a lot of the heavy lifting to get these studies done. And so thank you. And then finally, for whatever time is left, I'm happy to try to answer any questions anybody might have. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Oren. Yeah, we have 2 minutes. We can see if anyone has any burning questions, and then I will also work with Eric Burris to get him to share his screen. So does anyone have any burning questions for Oren?
This is Terry Fleming. I do.
Terry, go ahead.
So Oren, this is great work. I'm just curious, the work that Sharon Napier has been doing on the coliphage, development of a criteria for that. Does this throw a wrench in it, or does this help it?
Well, I can't comment on the work that she's doing directly. I can tell you that in the Gulf study that we have planned for next year, we will be measuring coliphage and crass phage in paired samples, to look and see what's going on there. So that's about the limit of what I can comment on that. I mean, I would guess that, for example, somatic coliphage is going to occur in a lot of different animal sources, and I think that F-specific does as well, maybe not to the same degree. You could potentially look at those as maybe general indicators of fecal pollution, and then maybe crass phage as more host associated, in this case, human associated. But it's kind of an exciting time because there's not a lot of information out there about the co-occurrence of coliphage and crass phage, or really any other viruses that might be of interest from a public health point of view.
Thank you.
There is some information, but it was just, we've only had a couple of years to, dig into it.
Thanks.
Oren, this is Eric Dubinsky. I'm just curious what you see as the advantages of using this over the HF183, given that the two are so tightly associated.
Well, you got to remember that in those samples that it's untreated sewage. So, these are it's pretty fresh. I actually, it's still too early to know, but I actually could envision a day where we do HF183 and crassphage together, because I think that a bacterial and a viral methodology will tell us different things in different situations. In some situations, they'll tell us the same thing, like when it's a sample where the human fecal pollution is fairly fresh, hasn't undergone a lot of environmental stressors, and had an opportunity to maybe diverge in terms of survival, because it's a bacteria versus a virus. But that's a very interesting question, and that's definitely something that is, underlying some of the research that I was talking about that we're doing right now.
Thanks.
Thanks, Oren. Yeah, I think if we can move on to Eric's presentation to make sure we stick with our PowerPoint. We will have some time after Eric's presentation if there are more questions. We can stay on the webinar a little bit after noon as well if people would like to continue to discuss. So if you can please hold your questions and feel free to email them to Oren if you don't want to forget them. And we'll have Eric go ahead and present, and then we can come back to discussion. Go ahead, Eric.
Thank you, Karen. You guys hear me okay?
Hear you.
Karen, can you verify that you can hear me okay? I've unmuted myself.
Yes, we can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, thank you for the invitation. Thanks for confirming you can hear me. Good late morning, everyone. I'm glad you all were able to attend today's meeting, and it was great to hear all the discussions going on. The Safe to Swim Network hasn't had a meeting, but we've been very busy with the Education and Outreach Committee, and I'm going to share you what we've been doing this year. Okay. So far we've had 7 meetings since February. We have a bunch of projects that we've completed and things that we're moving ahead on. One of the most important things early on was to come to a consensus on what we should be trying to achieve. And the committee's goal through a survey, we've determined that we'd like to just increase access to water quality and swimmable information. You can take a look, we had second most favorable goal would be increasing best management practices for water quality protection, followed by increasing technical and scientific knowledge. And nobody was interested in career guidance, but we did have folks that were interested in increasing trust in safe to swim postings, water quality objectives, which was something that was talked about a little bit earlier on about how people are perceiving information in our postings and such. So we got busy. We looked at opportunities where we could conduct outreach and education. This is a calendar published by the Clean Water team. So we were able to look through that and then have a general discussion on where we would find opportunities where we could try to increase traffic to our water quality portal. So this is the list that we came up with. National Public Health Week, Safe Swimming Week, World Oceans Day, International Surfing Day. July, we have Independence Day, but also we have Appreciation Month for lakes and Swimmable California Day. Very busy month for opportunities in July. Next would be Coastal Cleanup Day, which usually is early part of the month, but because of COVID and whatnot, they've moved it a little bit later into the month, which coincides now with World Rivers Day. So we'll have a combined outreach there, and then a World Toilet Day wrapping up the year in November. The social media that we have to share our messaging with comes from the California Water Quality Monitoring Council. They have Twitter account, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube channel as well. So we've been working on developing messaging, imagery, tags, social tags, put things into context, drive traffic to our website, and then sharing those, posting those on select social media. The Monitoring Council and OEBA has been great in helping us share our messaging. So we've had fantastic artwork produced by Michael up at State Board. These are graphic artists. So the first image there of the shark was shared during National Public Health Week, and again for Safe Swimming Week, which coincides with Memorial Day weekend. I kind of got the message across that, yeah, we have a bunch of folks that want to be in the water, like to play, but probably best right now to just kind of stay away from the beaches and just stay away, do our social distancing, stay at home. Next up, beaches started to become more open, and it's hard sometimes to keep surfers at bay. International Surfing Day, which is sponsored by Surfrider, they came up with a list of things to do: beach cleanups, surfing with your buddy, doing your social distancing, and then if you wanted to stay entirely away from the beach, they had some tarp surfing activities that you could do at home. So this was the message that we released, kind of cute, clever. We enjoyed sharing this message for International Surfing Day. Next was World Oceans Day. Our message, the beach looks good, but how's the water quality? And along with this message, we shared pertinent tags as well as our Safe to Swim portal URL. Following that, we have a message for Independence Day, which we are going to probably replicate and share for Labor Day. And it was just celebrate safely, just water. We weren't focusing specifically on inlands or coastal beaches, not trying to guess what water bodies were going to be open or closed, just if people were going to go to the water to, behave responsibly. And then we have our URL, which was converted to a tiny URL so we could get it up on the image itself. So again, that was for Independence Day. For Lakes Appreciation Month, we're teaming up with the CCHAB group. So our first message that went out was, is it safe to swim in our waters? And directed people to the Safe to Swim water quality portal. The following week, our message, are harmful algal blooms affecting our waters, at the URL directing people to the cyanobacteria water quality portal. Our next two images, we have one image and social media tags that we're sharing per week during the month. So we have 2 weeks left. So these are draft. We haven't given the thumbs up on these yet. The first one, we're going to reduce some of the wording on here. It looks a little busy, but the message is basically providing the public tips to stay safe at the beach. We're driving traffic to our water quality portal, but we want to give them some tips to stay safe and leverage Lakes Appreciation Month. Same thing with the harmful algal blooms. That'll be the last message that we share this year for Lakes Appreciation Month. Give them some pertinent tips to stay safe, and then also drive traffic to the water quality portal. Now, this month we also have Swimmable California Day, which is July 25th every year. So it's a Saturday this year. So 100% of the members that were at our meeting voted that we should participate. And then the type of activity that we should do, our first choice was sponsor an educational activity. Now with COVID, it's a little bit difficult, and this is our first year trying to do outreach and education, but we are going to do something. So let me share that with you. What we've done with our partner at Heal the Bay, I don't think Luke's on the line, but Heal the Bay is hosting for us some PDF documents. They're resources for teachers and resources for students so they can learn about how we do our science and how we protect the beach so that people can recreate safely. In addition to that, we've come up with a safe to swim water quality learning module of videos on the Clean Water Team's YouTube channel, all in one playlist. So we have the beach water quality testing, how to calculate a geomean, a little bit about a watershed. We all live in a watershed video, and that was produced professionally for an RCD and the water boards quite a while ago. Nice and short. All these videos are under 6 minutes. And we have microbial source tracking, contamination of water, and be a scooper hero, do the right thing, how to clean up after your pet. So these are things that we've identified already and are hosting online now. So coming up, we're in the midst of finalizing our graphic and social media tags, but also instead of just putting out this one message, we're going to throughout the week have this graphic tied in with video. So we're producing video clips that are under a minute that focus on some aspect of how we are all working towards a more swimmable California. So those should be done early next week, and will be able to be shared a few days prior to Safe to Swim Day. So most likely we'll have Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, three different videos being shared and driving traffic as well to our water quality portal and the educational resources that we have. So if you'd like to join us, like to contribute, want to stay with us and what's going on, maybe not be able to attend all of our meetings, but be able to contribute and share your gifts and talents, we'd love to hear from you. Just go ahead and send me an email, and I'll add you to that contact list. So thank you, Karen. Thanks, everybody. Be safe out there. If there's any questions, I'll be glad to address those now.
Great. Thank you, Eric. All right, let's take any questions for Eric first, and then we can jump back to Oren. Does anyone have questions for Eric?
And if you aren't following the Monitoring Council on any of their social media, please do. Please follow them and share our messaging and our images.
Yes, and that goes for the counties and the other local agencies as well. I think it would be great if we could share some of these graphics and the work that's already been done as far as messaging. We discussed that a little bit, getting the message out to the public. So at least you don't have to recreate the wheel. You could kind of share what we've done. So feel free to email Eric directly if you'd like any more information on that. I'll just do a quick announcement that there is tentatively going to be another Zoom meeting in November. That would be our normal scheduled meeting. So hopefully we can get back to the regular schedule and at least keep up with the Zoom meetings. I'd really like to do that. And a reminder, at the bottom of the agenda, there is information to access Beach Watch data in real time and to subscribe yourself to the listservs to receive agendas and announcements via email, as well as the, the beach program page under My Water Quality, which has information on the Safe to Swim group and a lot of other useful resources. So with that, if anyone else has questions for Oren again.
Really quick before we go into questions for Oren, this is Kat Walsh. I just want to mention that for our November meeting, like Karen said, it's most likely going to be a Zoom meeting. It will most likely also be a joint meeting for both the Northern group and the Southern group. And we'll try and identify a date and a time earlier for that meeting and get that announced sooner so you guys can get it on your calendars.
Yeah, hi, this is Bruce from LA County Public Works. I'd posted a question, and my question is for Oren. So there's a lot of stormwater municipalities trying to deal with stormwater, and we think human marker and or phage monitoring would help target risky sources. But FIB is still the TMDL standard. What does the EPA envision in terms of new standards replacing FIB?
Oh boy, that's above my pay grade, answering something like that. I'm just a scientist. You would have to go and talk to the Office of Wastewater Management that handles all the stormwater stuff for that. But the first part that you said, I do agree and am hopeful that fecal source identification technologies can be helpful for stormwater. There's a lot of good work going on in California already along those lines. And there are already a couple papers out there that have demonstrated that crassage can be recovered successfully and measured in stormwater discharges from different cities around the country. So it'll be interesting to see as more research is done what more we can learn, and how we might be able to use this new technology.
Thank you.
Does anyone else have questions for Oren?
There's a question in the chat.
Oh, Helen, is that from you? Helen, you? I don't.
Can you? Oh, let me see. I might be able to see it.
The question is if there's any information if crassage has been detected in recycled water, and if so, at what level?
Certainly not anything that I'm aware of that's been done by the EPA. Research from other groups is coming out every day. The last time I checked, which was about a month and a half ago, I was not aware of anything at that time that had been done. But I'm sure it's only a matter of time before that would be the case. The groundwater would be an interesting place to look for it too. There are certain types of water matrices where viral monitoring just works better. Because of the fate and transport properties of a virus compared to bacteria. So it'll be interesting as more people become aware of this technology and we learn more about it. To see what other areas we can apply it to.
This is Terry. I have one last question. Oren, will the slides be available?
They should be. I think they went through EPA internal clearance, and I think that there's a way to get them online through the EPA website. But if you email me, I can help you out with some of the stuff if you'd like.
Thank you.
Sure, thanks, Oren. And also, this meeting was recorded. I'm not sure how long it will take for it to be posted, but when it is, and I have that information, I can email. Probably I'll send out an email to the listserv letting everyone know. Are there any more questions for Oren, or we can also discuss others who were talking about earlier?
Sounds good. Well, thank you for the opportunity to speak and tell you guys about crassage. I think it's a fascinating new topic, and I think there's gonna be more excitement to come as we learn more about it.
Thank you so much, Oren. Yeah, it does sound very interesting. All right, well, if there are no more questions or anything people would like to discuss, then that concludes our July 16th, 2020 Joint Coastal Beach Water Quality Workgroup. Thank you all so much for attending. As always, feel free to email me comments or questions or suggestions for future meetings, and I look forward to hearing from you all in the future.